for me, my self-work has always been a lot of self-esteem issues when I was younger. I've always been physically, always very physical. And I played many different sports, and most sports that I did, I could excel. I could actually do quite well. But any sport that really had to do with competing with someone else, I would actually have a hard time with winning, especially if I noticed the other person was suffering by losing.
That's Dice Iida-Klein, and this is the Yoga Life podcast. Hello and welcome back. I'm a day late with this podcast, with good reason. I spent the last 10 days at my 300-hour teacher training with Bryony and Dice, and I had the pleasure of speaking with both of them on my podcast. Today's episode is with Dice. It's, what can I say about this guy? If you're in the yoga world, I'm sure you're familiar with his work, and if you're not, get to it because he's fantastic. We did the podcast in my car, which is a first and a good experience. And yesterday, I try and upload the podcast every Thursday, but yesterday Dice kindly invited me to go climbing. So instead of uploading the podcast with Dice, me and him went climbing instead, which was a great experience. And every part of my body hurts now. He's an impressive climber. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode. What I love about this is Dice. We went straight in the deep end from the get-go. He talked about his background, not too much about business, but more so about him as a person. And he's just a great guy, great human being. I hope you enjoy this. If you do, as always, 5 stars would be much appreciated on either iTunes or Stitcher. And if you have any comments, questions about the podcast, feel free to get in touch, and I'll definitely get back to you. All right, enjoy. How's it going, Dice?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What do you think of the studio?
I really love your studio. It's great. It's serious. I'm actually being serious. I'm laughing, but I think this is awesome. You even brought the pillow for me to lean up against the window. It's so good.
Because yesterday with Bri, we had to hold the mic, and I could tell our arms were getting fatigued. And we had to switch arms, and
especially with all those arm balances you guys.
Exactly. So to give people some context, I'm more than halfway through my 300-hour.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and this is the second module. This is the only one you're doing in Europe, is it?
This year, yeah. This is the only 300-hour we'll do this year in Europe. Next year, actually, we're doing one in Paris, more towards end of July into August, right, with a good friend of ours, Mathieu Bolderon.
Oh, he's the chap that you do it with in Thailand as well.
In Thailand as well, yeah. I mean, quick story, Mathieu was in our first 200-hour training back in 2013 in Thailand, and then he did our first 300-hour in Thailand back in 2016. And alone, he has done 5 200 hours, and I think he's done 3 or 4 300 hours.
So he has.
He doesn't even care about the hours. That wasn't the point for him. For him, it's quite inspirational and beautiful to see someone who just wanted to learn from all the different schools and modalities and different people in yoga specifically, how they led their trainings, so that he could then lead his own. And he kind of, his trainings are all inspired by everyone. You could tell he's true. It's true definition of a student who is also a teacher. So he's awesome. He's a great partner.
When did you do your first teacher training? As in, when did you teach your first teacher training?
Taught the first teacher training was June of 2013. Basically a month and a half after Sydney was born. We did our first 200-hour in Thailand, Koh Samui, Thailand. And I wouldn't be doing trainings if Bri hadn't, in a way, forced me to it.
Why is that?
I have a lot of self-work to do there, Kevin. I still do it, but my idea always was there's so many phenomenal teachers out there and senior teachers that are doing teacher trainings, how could our teacher training have any place or value in the yoga world, especially if there are these trainings that have been going on for so long? So I always wrestled with that. And what did I really have to offer these people who possibly wanted to come train with us?
Yeah.
But then I started recognizing over time, with the help of Brian and just with the help of yoga, that, I think we do have something valuable to offer. Maybe different or maybe similar, but there's actually room for everyone to share. And we're very fortunate that we get to keep doing these trainings. Yeah.
And since you started the first one in 2013, what would you say have been the main takeaways for you in terms of learning? In terms of as in what you've learned and on how to deliver things maybe more effectively.
Oh man, yeah. I think that what have I learned? I've learned that the information that we share, or at least that I share, is constantly changing. Although it's important to have a method, I think my method is being open to learning more and possibly adapting with the times. Yeah. People come to us to learn from us, but I think what people appreciate from our trainings is that we never say that this is the one way to do things, or we're never saying we're completely correct in these things. But the fact that we're always learning and I think progressing in our own practice, people can see that. And I guess it's not a big takeaway, but I've learned that there's basically room for everybody. There's an abundance for everybody if you believe it. And I think we have something to offer just as much as the next person who's leading another 200-hour or 300-hour has to offer. It's a beautiful practice. And we're very fortunate to do what we do. So,
yeah. Do you mind me asking, Dice, because when you say self-work, and you don't have to go into too much detail,
I don't mind, yeah.
But so to give you my impression of you from when I first heard of you to now, the first thing was I actually seen you on the documentary
Why We Breathe.
Why I Breathe, yeah, brilliant. And I mentioned this in the podcast when I did my review of part 1 of our teacher training.
I listened to it, yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Notice the way I said thanks, even though you didn't say it was good or not.
Oh, no, I thought it was great. I was
joking. I was like, yeah, thanks for listening. I don't need any feedback. No, but the thing that struck me, obviously, is what you do physically on Instagram. And then when I met you, what was surprising was you were more... to be honest, more humble. And I thought, this guy looks like he can do it all. So my interpretation was like, I bet he's going to think he's the bee's knees, as they say in the UK. So do you mind me asking, what would be your self-work?
Yeah, well, humility, I've learned, I don't know. I think it stems from my mother. My mother always was a very big proponent or a driver in recognizing how to be courteous to people and very thankful for the things that we have. And maybe to a fault. But for me, my self-work has always been a lot of self-esteem issues when I was younger. I've always been physically, always very physical. And I played many different sports. And, most sports that I did, I could excel. I could actually do quite well. But any sport that really had to do with competing with someone else, I would actually have a hard time with winning, especially if I noticed the other person was suffering by losing. Whether it was, let's say, example, being on the tennis team, varsity tennis team, and beating a kid and noticing that his parent or his coach is wailing on him verbally and saying how terrible he is or what he's doing wrong, that would put me in a mind state of purposely throwing the game, starting to mess up so that possibly that person didn't have to deal with that kind of ridicule or pain. I don't know. And in a way, I look at that and I'm like, well, that's not a good thing either, because then I'm self-sabotaging, which that's been a pretty big thing for myself too. When things are going well, I wonder why they're going well and almost play into making them go wrong, which, again, that's what I mean by self-work. Noticing these tendencies, these patterns, has been my work with yoga. Because I think before I wasn't even aware of these things. I just thought self-deprecation, thinking I'm shit, like not the shit, but shit, was where my mind would go. I don't think I've gotten away from all of that, but I've gained tools to notice when those things are happening and really ask myself, why am I feeling this way? Sometimes for some reason, if something's going right, I question why it's going right instead of enjoying the moment. So that's what I mean by self-work.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I have a big problem with, I don't like big egos in people. And that's not a judgment on them, but it's just normally I steer clear of those people. And I think I steer clear of it because I don't ever want to be that. I don't like the way those people have an outlook on life, and I don't like the way they make other people feel.
Yeah.
So I think just from a young age, without knowing it, I just somehow went into that type of personality. And in a way, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I notice there's always, the two ends of the spectrum. There's someone who's so overconfident, but that might come from a insecure place. And then there's someone possibly like me who, doesn't have the greatest self-esteem, but that also doesn't come from a good place. That's another place of insecurity. Neither one is worse off than the other. It's just, how do you find the balance between being confident, owning and holding your space without being a prick or trying to impose your way on other people? Mm-hmm. Wow, this got really deep.
It's good though. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for asking. I think, especially like look at Instagram and like, man, we're so fortunate that we get to put our lives out there the way we want people to see them. I get to put my practice out there. I get to say, hey, practice with me here. Wear what I'm wearing, and it's, I have trouble with it, but I also recognize the power that I have, and I hope that I try to be as real as possible and put out the happiness that I feel when I feel it, and also when I don't feel it. And I also see others out there that have a lot of power and write beautiful quotes and beautiful things. And at times, though, when I know them personally, they aren't living by what they say. That, to me, is the whole, in a way, slightly of the ego thing. And look, they're allowed to do that because they are helping people, whether the people know who they truly are or not. They see them from an outside and say, oh, man, they say amazing things. And that verbiage that you wrote the other day helped me out so well. It really resonated with me. That's where the miracle happens. And whether or not that person really lives it, I started to realize sometimes doesn't matter because it's still inspiring other people to live in a right way. That's like the catch-22 in a way. Mm. And then you have people who really are authentically themselves, like DK that we were talking about, who I think there needs to be more of that, which is the realist, obviously the highly intellectual person that kind of pokes the bear, or pushes the envelope a little bit and brings to light the things that most people don't want to talk about or be honest with, right? But I don't think you can just be that way either. You have to also have the bubbly frou-frou stuff because we're all different, But yeah, I mean, for me, the self-confidence, self-work. I know I'm jumping all over the place.
No, it's good, man. It's good. People want to hear you, not me. So
I think people like hearing you, man. You ask, how to hold conversation well. It's a real conversation. I don't think it's so put together. It doesn't need to be.
No,
but I do.
No. I mean, I think. As I said to you before, these are unscripted, and so it's good to let the conversation flow. But back to the point you made though about someone who is posting all this positive stuff. I think it's important to show balance because, ironically, if you're always posting inspirational stuff, every post is perfect, then I think, ironically, actually can make people feel worse about themselves sometimes. If they look at you, not you necessarily, if they look at someone who they model themselves on, which we all have a role model. I think that we look at someone and go, wow, they did this, that, and the other. Maybe I could do it. But if you see that they never have a bad day, it makes you feel like, oh, today I've done nothing. I've been on the couch, and this person is only doing positive things. So I agree with you. Inspirational stuff is important, but also to have the other side of to show the other side.
Yeah, I think that's the human condition. It's not like happiness is I guess you can call it a goal, but to be happy, it takes a lot of work. It's not just like bubbles, and it just happens. Like there's a lot of shit or crap that needs to happen, and you need to understand how to navigate the shit, how to actually sit in the shit, how to put certain shit aside, and you find it. And I think, like you said, you know, you post these inspirational things. This person's in Buenos Aires on top of a mountain, and it looks epic. And now the next week they're in a volcano in Hawaii or something, and and these guys are getting paid to travel on such a beautiful life, but at the same time these guys deal with depression, or their parent is terminally ill, or those are the things that's what makes it more human. And yeah, I mean, I tend to be more inspired by people who are showing all sides of everything, and I hope that that's what I can put out there as well, because I mean, I know at times I can put out just very happy stuff, and it's when I am feeling happy. But if I'm feeling shitty, I normally will say, I don't really feel like posting today, but I somehow posted. That's what it feels like. But I don't want to make it so that me posting is what shares my emotions. I hope that those that are close to me and in my actual proximity, those are the ones that I share when I'm feeling shitty or happy,
Yeah.
Instagram's a great way to reach people. It's not a bad thing at all, but it shouldn't be life, which I think it's become for a lot of people.
There needs to be a distinction there. I'm interested to go back to your early childhood, not in like a Dr. Phil way, but
no worries.
But you are half Japanese, is that right?
I am half Japanese.
Is your mother Japanese?
She is.
Interesting.
So that's definitely, if you look at Japanese culture, when I look at it, I see I'm an American, for sure. Born and raised Los Angeles, California. Moved around a lot, but LA is always home. But I think somewhere inside of me, my soul and my heart lives in the Japanese mindset of there's loyalty, as much honesty as possible. Try to be, especially with yourself, and a lot of courtesy. At least consciousness of your fellow man, which I find a lot of Japanese people are. It's just like it's ingrained. Maybe again to a fault, where it can be too far that you care about other people and how they feel and things like that. But I feel like that is something that is slowly being lost in the human condition, or in human nature, where we're so keen to get this, do this for ourselves, be seen, be heard, where we forget that other people exist in a way. And I know you didn't even get to ask the question. I just went off on the whole Japanese thing. But my mother, yes, is the Japanese one. And she raised me pretty Japanese, although I was in America.
Where were you born?
I was born in LA, Los Angeles. It's funny, because if you're from LA or NYC, most people normally think that you're a transplant. But I'm actually born and raised LA, Santa Monica, Venice.
So when you're not traveling, where's your home?
Los Angeles, Venice.
Still? Okay.
Yeah, still there. Home base is there. Oddly enough, my mother has lived in the United States for 40 years, became a U.S. citizen. She's moving back to Japan next month, September.
No way.
After 40 years, she's going back to Japan.
Whoa.
I was very proud of her for making the choice, because, it's been a very fruitful life here. But I think she wants to stop working. And in Japan, she actually can, there's like a pension fund, she can live off of what the government will pay her. And she's almost 70. My mom's been working for a long time. So.
Is your old man alive?
My father is alive. My dad is 10 years younger than my mom, so it's like quite young. He lives in Florida. He is remarried. And he was a tennis instructor later on in life. He was actually Los Angeles Police Department. He was LAPD for a long time. Yeah. But when he retired, he's always been in love with athletics and moving, but he was a skier, downhill country skier, and also big tennis player. So now he teaches something called pickleball, which is a smaller tennis court. It's a very funny sport, but he's very athletic and very into movement in that way. And I think that's where I get a lot of it from. But yeah, he lives in Florida, the East Coast.
So do you ever see yourself, you said you like Japanese culture, ever moving there?
That was actually my goal before I found yoga. I graduated from UCLA summer of 2007, and I thought I was going to move to Japan to teach English and live there the rest of my life. Whether or not I found like a Japanese wife or not, it didn't even matter. It was just I wanted to move to Japan, because I've always felt a calling. When I get off the plane there's something that just goes, like, I'm home. I love Japan. So yeah, sure. One day I would love to move there. But I mean, my current life just has me my home base is where my son is, so
Yeah.
Los Angeles, but I travel quite a bit, you know. But yeah, there's definitely a calling to Japan. I do love it. I still love the culture, the food, the people,
Yeah.
the way of life. Yeah.
I think it's interesting what you say there about that it's almost so deep ingrained. I've been to Japan a couple of times. So deep ingrained in the culture that they're one. They really look after each other and out for each other,
Yeah.
and they have a massive sense of unity. That I think when we were walking into the car, we were just talking about that, weren't we? About how you can live in London, for example, which is where I'm from, and never be alone but feel very lonely. And in Japan it's not like that. I mean, you could so I know what you mean, and there's a lot to be said for that, for feeling like you belong.
Yeah. And I think in a I totally get it. You know, you could, but I think even in Japan though, it's funny, as the Western culture, sorry to say, as it infiltrates the East more and more, the solidarity, or that individualism, which is important, is slowly taking over to the point where people are actually forgetting about one another, which is kind of sad to see. The younger generations now are turning more into what we see over here, I think, in the West. But still in Japan, I still see that idea of taking care of one another, or literally helping the elderly. If someone's crossing the street in Japan that's obviously slow, you will actually see, at least from my eyes, I've seen people help the elderly, just because that's, you know, like, I mean, that's however small that is and however weird of an example that could be, it's something that you don't see much anymore. You know?
It's a great example. I was talking to someone about this the other day on the podcast as well, that in Japan, in Asia, in East Asia, elders are revered. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, you've lived longer than I have, therefore I know more than you do, so we should listen to you. Whereas in Ireland, England, the Western culture, everyone will say it, old people are seen as a nuisance. That's as a
senile.
Yeah, and that's a big problem of like loneliness amongst older people. Going off on a tangent here.
Well,
but you know, we're all going to be old one day. And do you want to be old in somewhere where you're respected, or somewhere where you're left alone? And you see huge posters up in Ireland now, massive billboards, and it's just a picture of an old person's face, and like, this is John and he lives alone, and you know, think about that basically.
Wow.
Yeah, it's become a campaign.
Well, I mean, that means it's actually something that's not a problem, but it's something to notice there. Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm happy they have campaigns like that. That's good.
More old people on billboards, please.
Yeah, bring that to light, please.
So you talked about the fact that you travel so much, and I do your yoga classes a lot. What I'm interested to go into the more business side of things.
Yeah.
Not revenue, but just in terms of your schedule. So you have teacher training, you have the Yoga Glow. What else do you do in terms of
workshops? Are a primary thing too, which I think are kind of, so the Yoga Glow online gets people to teacher trainings and gets people to workshops, you know. And then I also think workshops gets people to trainings and also turns people on to yoga. I think it's all very kind of, it circulates. But at home, I don't teach regular scheduled classes anymore, because I tried doing that for a good year after I started traveling a lot, and it was just too much time away. So it was unfair to the students because I wasn't regular. The substitute wasn't always the same person. They didn't always teach, not necessarily like me, but in the same realm. So I ended up having to give up all of my regularly scheduled classes at home because it became so irregular when I was home. You know, Sydney's going into school now, kindergarten. And I mean, the way it works since his mom and I are separated is, you know, she has him for 10 to 14 days. And when I come home, I want to be with him for the same amount of time. But in the time that she has him, normally she has Taylor, her daughter, my stepdaughter still, you know, always will be, has her. So when I come home, we have to do the shift around. But yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm out of town probably 5 to 6 months. Luckily, Sydney's with me for about more than 3 to 4 of those months, because of, if it's a big training in China for, let's say, 10 days, he comes for that. He'll skip school for that. If it's the trainings during the summer, he's there for that whole thing. So there are times, though, where I miss him, especially when I do workshops during the school year. But that's mainly what I do. When I'm home, I get to be a full-time dad, which is, I mean, that's a super sweet gig. That's what I get to do at home. Home is almost like a vacation more than times that I'm out.
Yeah. A lot of people that listen to this are new yoga teachers, and what I loved about the first module is, if you don't mind talking about this, is you talked about when you were running around teaching 25, 30 classes, whatever, a lot of classes a week, and you started developing, what's it called, when your hair starts falling out?
Oh, alopecia.
Alopecia.
Alopecia areata. Yeah.
Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't just take teaching yoga to do that, but basically, when our bodies are magical things, but hair and actually nails are the two things that your body decides first. If you don't have enough energy, if your adrenals are shot, your thyroid glands can be off, or the levels can be off. Your body will stop producing hair, or it will stop producing nails. It's pretty amazing. So when I started teaching 2008, and by 2011, I was teaching. It was somewhere around 21 or 22 classes a week on top of, I think it was 4 privates, 5 privates a week. I had one day off. Monday was my church day, my day off. But oftentimes that would get covered up with a sub or something, or I would help someone out. So I started, and I was practicing. This was before Sydney, but still had Taylor, and Brian and I were already together. And I guess I didn't recognize it, but my diet on top of just my adrenals were so out of sorts that my body decided to make me lose hair. So it started off being like a little speck, and then it turned into like a penny size, a U.S. penny, and then like a U.S. quarter. And the U.S. quarter size started popping up all over my head. So I started losing hair just in patches. And, I went and got steroid injections first to try and see if Western medicine would work, and those injections didn't do anything. And then I finally went to an Eastern doctor, a Chinese holistic doctor who's also an acupuncturist, and she basically changed my diet, took me off of certain foods that weren't working for me, specifically refined sugar, because I like sugary things. At the time, it was gluten, which I've reintroduced, and I feel good, but I don't have it that often, or gluten, wheat, and then dairy as well. She didn't take me off of meat or anything like that. She was like, as long as you eat high quality protein, you know where it's coming from, it's not really, no antibiotics, no injection, nothing like that, you're good to go. But she cut out those things within 1 month of her diet, plus taking Chinese herbal pills. My hair started sprouting back really quickly.
Wow.
So your body will tell you that something's wrong. Obviously, when you're in pain, your body sends pain signals, right? Well, this wasn't an acute pain. This was like my body was just saying we're tired, and so my hair was the indicator.
You've touched on a potentially raw topic there about meat, because also the vegan army listen to this podcast too, and I'm a former vegan. That's an exclusive because I haven't confessed fully until just this moment.
So you just confessed?
I know.
I pulled it out of him, guys.
Yeah. So, what's your? You don't have to go into too much detail because I'm sure you're probably sick of talking about it. But what's your reason?
I'm happy to. So I was vegan for a good year and a half.
A year and a half?
Yeah.
It's a decent go.
Right around. What was that? It was actually after I really started doing yoga. Around mid 2008 to 2010, right before I actually met Bryony. And it was honestly a previous girlfriend was a major vegan, and I started following, her diet and her whole way of life in a way. Tried my best to supplement by cooking more, learning how to cook, how to take care of the minerals that I was missing through meat, protein specifically, obviously different vitamins, which you can get through leafy greens and different beans, legumes, all of it. Yes, it can work. But I started to recognize, much like yoga alignment and everything, it works for different body types. I will say, oddly enough, I didn't lose weight. I gained more weight. I don't know how that happened. Either the amount that I was having to eat or cover up was one thing. 2, I've never been anemic. I've never had blood issues. But when I noticed my energy levels had dropped, I couldn't practice the way I wanted to practice, which was normally quite vigorous. I was having a lot of trouble. Staying awake was the big one. I would sleep like 8 or 9 hours a day and still wake up pretty tired. So I went to a Western doctor, did blood work, and they basically said, look, you're borderline anemic because you've stopped eating meat. They said, if you can at least add eggs back into your diet, do some form of protein, and if you can, maybe eat red meat once a month, was what they told me.
Okay.
And I honestly reintroduced fish back into it along with the eggs, and I started feeling so much better.
Yeah.
Now, this is not to say everybody should eat meat. This is not a campaign saying that this is what you should do. I'm by no means saying you should do anything. I'm just saying I know what works for me. I've tried the other side. Maybe I didn't do it as well as what other people would say, but I really gave it a good go. And for the way I move, the way I physically use my body, I needed it. I know there are vegan athletes that are shredded and ripped and whatever. So, who knows? We'll find out in the years to come what the results are of people living that way. And I think it's neither one is good or bad. Just got to see what works for you.
Yeah.
I will say that I've known a few pro-vegans, really big vegans that have been vegan for 15 years, and they started sneaking in bone broth because they needed they needed something else. But again, this is not pointing the finger at anybody. I think remember that ahimsa means nonviolence, not only to all animals, to humans, but also in your thoughts towards other people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's a diplomatic answer. I mean, like, obviously people know that. I think when you make a choice to be a vegan, it's such a difficult choice that you become so passionate. It's easy to become fundamental.
Of course, it's good to become passionate about it, but remember, become passionate for you did it for yourself, not because you're trying to make other people, Gandhi said it, be the change you wish to see in the world, but it also doesn't mean then you hold a grudge against the world for not following you.
Yeah.
That goes completely against yogic philosophy. That was never the idea. So if people don't follow you, you get mad. People don't do what you're doing, you get mad. People don't do what you think is right, you judge them. I think that defeats the purpose beyond ahimsa. That's not yogic in its own way. Stand up for what you believe in, be firm about that, but you should still be able to have non-vegan friends if you're a vegan.
So you mentioned about I try to segue whenever I can about the future, and I know we're in a car and we'll kind of wrap this up, but what do you see yourself doing in 10 years?
Oh,
this is like the job interview question.
Oh man, that is a hard one, and it's always been the toughest for me, is looking down the road. Like I tend to live in the past, which can be bad too, but I'm also a present person, like now person. I mean, 10 years down the road, I mean, I don't see this job as something that I need to stop doing. You know how some people want to say, hey, take the method and make it so that other people can teach your method. That way you can just sit back and not do it. I don't want to be that person. I like connecting with people. I like the travel part. Sure, I can calm that down, but I enjoy sharing yoga, movement, and the things that have really benefited my life. So 10 years down the road, I honestly hope to be doing the same stuff, maybe in lesser frequency, but I still hope to be hands-on doing trainings, hands-on doing the workshops, putting in the work, not because it's work, but because, man, I mean, I'm so fortunate to do what I do. I'm lucky enough to say that I'm in the 1% of yoga teachers that get to do the lifestyle the way I get to live it, and I get to literally make money living the way I want to live, which is such a blessing. I don't take it for granted. So I don't want to do a get-rich-quick scheme where I make someone else teach my method, quote-unquote. I don't think we really have a method. I want to keep doing what I'm doing now. Maybe the one change would be a little less on the travel, for sure. A little more time at home. But otherwise, no, still sharing yoga. Still being a student of yoga more than anything. Still moving, still practicing. Yeah, I mean, I know it's a very bland answer, but that's kind of where I see it. I don't really need to change much. I mean, there's subtle shifts that need to happen, but
yeah.
yeah.
That's a great answer. Well, Dice, thanks so much, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. It's been amazing being here.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed learning more about Dice. Next week I have with me the other half of Bryony Smythe. Bryony talks more about entrepreneurship and how to diversify as a yoga teacher and generate income from many different areas. So tune in next week for that. As always, if you enjoy it, I'd really appreciate a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, and hope you have a great week. Bye.